Hi friends! This week on Misadventures in Cooking, we're making chicken parm. Next month I am making lasagna. This one was like pre-planned and it's a thing. It's a thing. I had to roll with it. So next month. So for this recipe, you're gonna need some flour, some eggs, some panko breadcrumbs, I got the Italian kind, some olive oil, some mozzarella and provolone cheese, I got a mix, some Parmesan cheese, some basil, of course some chicken, some sauce, and I'm gonna be straight up, don't skimp out on the sauce. I did, and I apologize to the good people of Italy. This was practically a war crime. I promise to do better next time. And finally some spaghetti. Alright, let's go. The first thing I did is I took a cup of flour and I put it in a Tupperware container. Then I took my chicken breast and rolled it around in the flour. I learned this whole process is called dredging, and it just gives the egg something to stick to before you roll it around in the breading. Just a note, I used thin chicken breasts in this recipe. The original called for me to take whole chicken breasts and just pound them thin, so I figured this would save me a step, which it did, but it led to some problems with my cook time, which I will explain later. From there I broke a couple eggs and I whisked the crap out of them. Use your best judgment here. I thought I needed a third one. Then I added a cup of my breadcrumbs to a container, along with a half cup of Parmesan cheese, and then I shook it together. At that point, I was ready to begin breading my chicken. I went to town dipping each breast in egg and then rolling it around in my breadcrumb mix. I did need to mix together more breading to get through all of my chicken. I just kind of eyeballed it, and whatever I had left, I used to coat whatever I may have initially missed. Boom. Look at all those chickens. So the recipe called for me to let the chicken rest for 10 to 15 minutes after I got done waterboarding it with eggs and breadcrumbs. I used this as an opportunity to heat up my oil. I just coated the bottom of my pan and set it over a medium heat. From there I got on the struggle bus that was opening up this can of tomato sauce. Seriously, this whole clip lasts over 2 minutes. It's an embarrassment. Honestly, I blame myself for loaning out my good can opener to Gabe over a decade ago and never asking for it back. Now, this is where I started to fry the chicken, which I don't have a ton of experience with. So I ended up doing a lot of guesswork the entire time. See, the idea is just to fry the outside so we get a nice crisp crust, and then we're gonna finish cooking our chicken in the oven. However, this is where the thickness of the chicken came into play. I didn't want to overcook my meat, and I wasn't 100% sure how long it would take the oil to cook it. On top of that, I don't think I had my oil hot enough when I started frying. The recipe said 2 minutes per side, and things weren't golden brown until around 3.5 minutes. So I just sort of chicken winged it, lol. Eventually, I found the right temp to cook things at, and I determined I could probably cut my oven time in half based on how long my chicken was in the oil. A pair of tongs probably would have been super helpful here, but I only had a fork, so I made do. After each piece got browned, I moved it over to a plate and covered it with my microwave shield. Frying all this chicken probably took me around 30-ish minutes. While the last few pieces of my chicken browned up, I preheat my oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and I boiled some water and started to cook my spaghetti. I then took my pre-fried chicken over to my oven. Over here, I added 4 pieces of chicken to my baking sheet. I then put 2 spoonfuls of sauce on each piece of chicken and smothered each piece in my provolone mozzarella cheese blend. I almost forgot the basil. Don't forget the basil. I don't have an initial shot of me putting those chickens into the oven, so here's a boiling pot of pasta. So the big twist in this video is the bake function on that oven doesn't actually work. So these initial chickens came out a little bit darker than I expected, and I didn't know if I had undercooked them or overcooked them. I just stuck them in the oven while it was preheating for about 8 minutes and hoped for the best. To my surprise, the inside of the chicken was actually cooked pretty great. Despite that, I feel like I overcooked the outside, so I went and committed some blasphemy and set my oven to the air fryer setting. I prepped my little chickens with the sauce, the cheese, and the basil, and stuck them in the oven, or air fryer. Whatever you want to call it. While I let that cook for a minute, I went back over to my pasta, drained it, added sauce, and mixed it together. I let my chicken air fry for about 6 minutes until the inside was cooked all the way through, then I took it out. I'm super surprised, but I'm extremely happy with how this recipe turned out. And there you have it, chicken parm. I actually really love the way this recipe turned out. The chicken itself was phenomenal. In fact, the weakest part of the entire meal was the pasta, and that was because I used a pre-canned sauce. So next time I make this meal, yes, I'm going to make it again, I'm probably going to make my own pasta sauce or invest in a higher quality one because the canned stuff just ain't cutting it. The sauce that I did use, which was Hunt's, was unsatisfying at best. It was thin and there wasn't a whole lot of flavor to it. It didn't adhere to my pasta very well. It's hard to mess up pasta, and I feel like adding that sauce messed up my pasta. Granted, I was using wheat pasta, however, I feel like the sauce was just bad. Other than that, I feel like the entire process went pretty smooth, but once again, there's always some stuff I can improve upon. For instance, next time I might use a full chicken breast instead of the thin ones, just because it's bigger and probably will be more satisfying in terms of the entire meal. The thin chicken breasts were nice, but you had to have a couple of them. I'd also look into seasoning my chicken more to begin with, whether it be marinating it or seasoning it even more before I breaded it. The breading itself was really good, however, I feel like the chicken was just chicken. I mean, it was tasty, but it could have been better. Also, I ran out of oil during the frying process. That's my fault. I should have had more oil on hand. However, that's something that I'm going to do differently next time is just use more oil. I'm also going to invest in a pair of tongs for the future because it'll make turning that chicken much, much easier, along with other things I might have to turn in the pan. So the reason I don't use my big oven is because it don't work. I think there's a bad board on it or something like that. So I'm stuck using the smaller oven. In the future, if I don't have access to a larger oven again, I'd actually start the entire process on air fry to begin with. And that's it for this month's misadventure in cooking. Next month, I'm making lasagna, but if you have any suggestions or recipes you'd like me to try in the future, let me know in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see you next week.